Hiya folks, welcome to the show. As of late, I feel I've been getting way too much credibility. I mean, if I'm not careful, people might actually start to take my thoughts and opinions seriously. There's gotta be a way I can put an end to it and prove once and for all that I have no idea what I'm talking about. Star vs. the Forces of Evil is better than Gravity Falls. That ought to do it. On a completely unrelated note, what exactly does it take to get into a witness protection program these days? Okay, so take the wackiness of the Mickey Mouse shorts, the deep lore of Adventure Time, the violence of the Powerpuff Girls, and throw in a pinch of Sailor Moon for good measure. What do you get? An abomination. Or at least that's what Twitter would say. If you were asking me, I'd say that sounds a lot like Star vs. the Forces of Evil. One of the most complex, multi-layered, mature, and emotionally gripping stories to ever come out of Disney TVA. Or at least it was for 3.5 seasons. Airing from 2015 to 2019 across both Disney Channel and Disney XD, Star vs. the Forces of Evil is a comedic suburban/high fantasy epic which lasted a grand total of 4 seasons, 77 episodes, and some weird experimental live shows that still haunt my dreams to this very day. For a majority of its run, Star vs. was one of the most successful cartoons by Disney, with a huge dedicated fanbase. So how did a series so beloved and critically acclaimed end up as the punching bag of the cartoon community? Well, hopefully by the end of this we'll have some kind of idea. Because if not, then I'm about to waste a lot of people's time. Like all of us, Star vs. the Forces of Evil had to go through many changes before it was suitable for public eyes. The original concept was first thought of by creator Darren Nefsey in a final year of college. Initially, the series would chronicle the misadventures of Star, an average girl who dreams of having magical Sailor Moon-esque powers, while constantly being at odds with her mortal enemy, a boy that's obsessed with karate. She first pitched the series to Cartoon Network through their failed shorts program, The Cartoon Institute. So why didn't they pick it up? I'll give you a hint, it starts with sex and ends with ism. Yep! Cartoon Network turned down Nefsey because they have a strict policy against greenlighting shows that have a risk of attracting an audience with 2 X chromosomes. I mean, it's not like the studio's first ever hit was a show starring girls, but yeah, cancel your action cartoon because its audience wasn't 100% testosterone. That makes perfect sense. Nefsey then took the idea to the House of Mouse, who would give it the go-ahead in March 2013, soon as she made a few minor adjustments. The characters were all aged up, Star was now a princess who actually did have magic powers, the series would incorporate travelling across dimensions, and finally, rather than being mortal enemies, Star and the boy, now named Marco, would be best friends. By the time the series finally moved into full production, Nefsey had been tooling the concept for around 6 years. Which sounds like a lot, but believe it or not, many animated shows go through a similar process. I mean, I don't want to brag or anything, but my life's been stuck in development hell for over 20 years now. The first glimpse audiences got of the new off-the-wall series was the 2014 Gravity Falls Comic-Con panel, where along with a trailer for Pen Zero Part-Time Hero, the Star vs. the Forces of Evil theme song was revealed, and people fell in love with its expressive, fast-paced animation, distinct art style, and the idea of just these 2 teenagers hopping between different dimensions, leading to all sorts of interesting stories and fun characters. So, over 5 months away from the show's premiere, and it had garnered a decently sized, dedicated fanbase. Yeah, still in the womb and already making friends. What were you doing at that time? Star vs. the Forces of Evil made its grand debut on January 18th, 2015, before immediately going on a 2-month hiatus. Okay, this is actually something Disney does sometimes, where they air the first episode of a new series as a sneak peek, and then 1 or 2 months later the series actually starts. I mean, I don't get what benefit that has as opposed to starting the series. Well, that just shows why I'm not a network executive. Well, that and the fact I somewhat have a soul. Oh, that explains it. They air the first episode on Disney Channel before moving the show over to Disney XD. Almost like they know it's a significantly less popular channel and thus won't get as good ratings, which brings to mind the question, why not just air it on the Disney Channel? Shortly after the sneak peek, the show was renewed for a second production season, which is how all season renewals would be handled from then on. I have previously discussed how I believe this decision was made as a result of the 364-day hiatus between Gravity Falls seasons 1 and 2, due to the studio deciding to renew it late into season 1. And now, I've discussed it twice. My point is, this showed quite a change from how the studio had operated until then. As from now on, a season premiere would be preceded by either an announcement of the series being renewed, or complete radio silence, which pretty much just means, yeah, we cancelled it. And this is how things would work for every single Disney series moving forward. Well, at least half of them. Oh, Disney. I love how consistently inconsistent you are. Before I start talking about Season 1, I should probably take a moment to mention that this season is very different from what the show ends up as. Compared to the rest of the series, Season 1 has a much more manic energy and tends to really exaggerate the characters. There are a decent number of people who only like Season 1, for that and other reasons we'll get to, because Season 1 of Star vs. the Forces of Evil is fascinating in terms of showing how animation was moving away from simplistic comedies towards emotional serialized narratives. Especially since Star only had 13 episodes to make that transition, whereas all other Disney shows had at least 20 episode orders. Which I'm sure had nothing to do with the fact Star vs. was the first ever Disney TVA show created by a woman. Wow, this is getting off track. So, what is Star vs. the Forces of Evil? Star vs. the Forces of Evil is an 11-minute episodic comedy series that chronicles the life of Star Butterfly, a magical princess from another dimension who would rather fight monsters and ride unicorns than sip tea. On her 14th birthday, she is bestowed a precious family heirloom, a magic wand, which she almost immediately burns the kingdom to the ground with. She's sent to Earth, the only dimension in the multiverse that's okay to destroy because we're doing it already. She winds up as a foreign exchange student in the town of Echo Creek, where she goes to stay with the Diaz family and becomes fast friends with their son Marco. Most episodes follow either of two basic story structures. Either Star gets into fish out of water shenanigans by misunderstanding Earth culture, or her and Marco travel to another dimension which usually has some dangerous creatures they have to fight. While all this is going on, the duo must also fend off a group of monsters led by the incompetently ineffective Ludo who plot to steal Star's wand and do something. And that's basically the show. Girl has magic wand, monsters want it, best friend is a disembodied horsehead with a Val girl accent, just your standard animated fare. So why did so many people gravitate towards the show? If you ask me, Star vs. the Forces of Evil connected with people right out the gate because the first season had a very experimental feel to it. It was very much a throw everything at the wall and see what sticks type of show, that in my opinion was the first animated series to naturally integrate modern internet humor. Episodes at times feel like they were ripped straight from Newgrounds in terms of how surreal the comedy and stories can be, and seeing that kind of writing both on a Disney show and done exceptionally well caught a lot of people off guard. Take episode 3A, Monster Arm. In this episode, Marco breaks his arm right before a big karate tournament, and in an attempt to fix it, Star accidentally replaces it with a tentacle, which ends up making him really popular.
I wanted to be my boyfriend. Me too!
Then it turns out the tentacle is actually evil as it plots to slaughter all humans and feast on their bowels.
Not my bowels! I love my bowels!
And that's only the tip of the iceberg in terms of how absurd this show can be. I feel the best way you can possibly describe Season 1 is controlled randomness, in that it takes the aforementioned, for lack of a better term, meme humour, but uses it within your standard 3-act structure. Its loud and explosive comedy never gets too exhausting because there's always something to break it up. There's also a lot of subversive elements to the series that really helps it stand out amongst its contemporaries. For instance, Star doesn't hide her powers, and instead everyone just knows and accepts that magic exists now, which meant the writers could be a lot more creative in terms of the stories they wanted to tell. Another reason the show was such a breath of fresh air is its action. By the time the series premiered, genuine action shows were a dying breed. So here comes this show with well choreographed, fast-paced and intense fight scenes that had been seldom missing from cartoons for quite some time. But as I said, soon the show would quickly start to change, focusing a lot less on the outlandish magical girl adventures and more on the interpersonal relationships between the characters. And ironically enough, this change would start to take effect with an episode all about puberty. Episode 6A, Puberty, is about Star undergoing a transformation which causes her to act erratically and trap all the boys in school. While the episode still does have the same comedy, it's much more underplayed, as the focus of the episode is on trying to tell an at times serious story with slightly disturbing visuals that by the end hints the characters will continue to grow and change throughout the series. But then we arrive at episode 8, Blood Moon Ball and Fortune Cookies. Blood Moon Ball is yet another episode that is lighter on comedy in favour of telling a deeper and beautifully animated story that just so happened to launch 1,000 ships. But Fortune Cookies was the real game changer that introduced us to Toffee, a mysterious, sharply dressed lizard man who seems to have a history with Star's family. Following some episodes more in line with the earlier stuff and the series' first ever full 20-minute episode, which is all about the expectations society places on young people and the harmful messages young girls in particular are fed, we arrive at episode 11A, Munipendence Day, the episode that cemented Star vs. the Forces of Evil as one of the most complex and mature storylines in television animation at that time. Munipendence Day is about Star inviting all her friends around so they can take part in one of Muni's most celebrated holidays. And the festivities end with everyone reenacting the Great Monster Massacre. Meanwhile, the monsters have come up with another plan to take the wand. Throughout the episode, Star starts to slowly realise that her people were not the good guys in this situation, and begins to question the narrative she's been taught all her life. It all builds up to the end where, after the monster's plan falls through, rather than blasting them like she always does, Star lowers her wand and allows them to escape. Said monster is then fired and cast out as the pieces of Toffee's plan are starting to fall into place. And then the episode ends with this. Munipendence Day is arguably the most important episode of the whole series, as it serves as a catalyst for both the overarching story of the next 3 seasons and Star's character arc, as she starts developing into a more compassionate and responsible person who wants to right the past wrongs of her family. And it's the only episode of the series not available on Disney Plus UK. Make of that what you will. Now, it's important that we recognise and have a discussion about how whenever a show like this tries to tackle a topic such as prejudice, they always make one side of the coin inhuman, regardless of how well intentioned the people behind the show are. However, I am not in a position to speak with any authority on that matter, but if anyone wants to discuss it in the comments, I will be sure to pin it. I feel it is entirely possible to fully acknowledge the more problematic elements of that storyline, while still appreciating what it did for both the characters and direction of the series. But if you feel different, that is completely understandable. And with that, let's wrap up season 1. All the various storylines come together in the season finale, Storm the Castle, which I don't want to spoil anything about because it's just a 20-minute spectacle that wraps up everything from the first season in an intense, emotional, shocking, and visually stunning bow, while also setting up just where the series is going from here. See? I told you season 1 was fascinating. What started out as a pretty standard fish out of water story with such a unique energy and modern sense of humour had by the end undergone a full transformation into something much more complex, multi-layered and emotional that left the fandom with 100 burning questions. The surreality had been pulled back a bit and replaced with much more grounded character studies that demonstrated how each of them was slowly but surely starting to grow. This series was going places no previous Disney show would even look at, and everyone was waiting with bated breath to see what the second season would bring. So now that the series had fully established itself and developed into one of the leading forces behind the new wave of all ages serialized cartoons, let's see what season 2 has in store. Oh no. Okay, season 2 is not entirely about the love hexadecacon the show is starting to amass, but I do feel this season is mostly characterized by its teen drama more so than any other. Yet, even with those elements, it's still an incredibly strong sophomore year for the show that continues from the great place season 1 left off, further expanding the type of stories the series wanted to tell in both their scope and themes. In the time since the series had premiered, both Phineas and Ferb and Gravity Falls had reached their conclusion, leaving Star as the new face of Disney XD, meaning there was a lot riding on season 2. So before we do the impossible and try and make sense of teen angst, let's go over the actual storyline of the season. Season 2's overarching story is all about magic, more specifically how Star uses it. So in Storm the Castle, some stuff happens, And basically Star's wand is split in two now, with Ludo getting one half. This essentially means Star's magic is even more chaotic than usual, and has a tendency to be corrupted, whether it be by her own negative emotions or some mysterious magical fritz that no one can figure out the cause of. This creates an interesting change in Star as she stops relying on magic as being a quick fix to all her problems, which leads to us seeing a much more proactive and resourceful Star. But it's not all nuclear rainbows and laser shooting puppies for Princess Butterfly, as we also see her really start to deal with the responsibilities of one day being queen, having her go through several hardships and losses. Now, as previously mentioned, Ludo also now has part of the wand, so how's he doing? Not great. After losing everything in the season 1 finale, he is left a hermit drifting through dimensions until he finds the second half of Star's wand, which starts talking to him. From there, he starts to change, becoming a lot more violent and ruthless. Oh, also he befriends / tames a spider and a bird. But don't think they forgot about Marco, as he gets put through the ringer a lot this season. From worrying about his future and all his loved ones moving on without him, to continuing his attempts to tell his crush how he feels, to getting trapped in an alternate dimension for 16 years, then returning to his old life with all the memories. You know, normal teenage boy stuff. This year was also all about expanding the supporting cast, by giving more depth to those already established like Tom, Buffrog, Glossaric and Moon, as well as adding new ones, most notably the Magical High Commission, who will play a large role moving forward. This is a season where sometimes we'll get entire episodes focusing on another character, and it really helps the whole world feel interconnected, as slowly all these characters find themselves as part of the overarching story. Now, from the clips I've been showing, you probably already can tell this season looks a little different. There's a lot less of the bouncy fluidity and off-model expressions that populated season 1. That's because there's been a change in animation studios. Most of season 1 was handled by Mercury Filmworks, who are most famous, or at least they should be, for their work on Tangled the series and Wander Over Yonder. However, for whatever reason, be it budget or just executives being awful, the rest of the series was split between Rough Draft, which is standard good quality TV animation, and Sugar Cube, whose episodes tend to look very dull and rigid compared to the usual animation quality. I should point out though that the studio has significantly improved, as now they animate on both Big City Greens and the Owl House. Now here's a controversial opinion, because honestly, what else were you expecting from me? I don't mind the change in animation. Yes, Mercury's work was visually stunning and very expressive, but I don't think that style would have fit the new tone and direction of the series. And I really like some of Rough Draft's work on the later episodes. The first half of season 2 falls very much in line with the latter episodes of season 1. A nice mix of smaller character-focused stories and big lore-heavy episodes that advance the plot. But then we arrive at the mid-season finale where once again, everything changes. Bon Bon the Birthday Clown is the most relationship-heavy focused episode of the series so far, meaning it's finally time to address the show's biggest criticism by talking about a bunch of teenagers' love lives. Which means I also have to briefly address the show's fandom and their relationship to shipping. So by this time, there were 5 major ships in the fandom: Starco, Jarko, Tomstar, Ostar, and Tomko, which led to a many ship war. Whether or not these kinds of stories were intended to be explored from the start, it's easy to come to the conclusion that the crew of the show saw how much the fandom fixated on these elements, which may have influenced how much time gets dedicated to exploring all these relationships in season 2. However, they're not that bad. Season 2 of Star vs. the Forces of Evil contains 41 episodes, and of those 41, only 8 heavily focus on romantic relationships between the characters. Granted, 3 of those are half-hour specials, 2 of which make up the hour-long season finale, but my point still stands. People often blew out of proportion how much of the series focused on the various love triangles, but then we enter the home stretch of season 2, which to me is where the show peaked. Ludo steals both the book and by extension Glossaric and uses it to start learning magic. It's then revealed that Toffee has been inside Ludo's wand the whole time, which we all saw coming. Then the season finale takes everything the show is, and stop me if you've heard this one before, raises it to the next level. In preparation for her Song Day celebration, which will fully introduce her as the future Queen of Munich, Star must work with the Royal Songstrel to write her own princess song. Star tries to ditch the task because every princess song up until then has been generic fluff with no real truth or meaning behind it. Eventually, Star and the Songstrel Rubariat write a song that perfectly captures just who Star Star is and all her faults. And I do mean all her faults. As the song reveals to the people of Muni that Ludo stole the Book of Spells and that the King and Queen covered up the whole thing. And to make matters even worse, Ruberia added an extra verse without Star's knowledge, revealing her crush on Marco. This turns the entire kingdom against the family as tensions have never been higher. Then part 2 kicks off with everyone celebrating the start of summer vacation. But things are still awkward between Star and Marco. Good thing that's not the real story of the episode. The real plot follows Moon and the Magical High Commission as they carry out an assault on the ancient monster temple to retrieve the book and glossaric, only to be taken out one at a time by Toffee, leading to what I'm fairly sure is the first prominent on-screen character death in a Disney show. Just as Star and Marco have narrowly avoided working through their issues, Moon arrives and tells Star they have to leave because Toffee will be coming for them. Star says she only needs 2 minutes, during which she goes downstairs and fully confesses her feelings to Marco, before leaving as the episode ends on a devastating cliffhanger.
What do you mean? Star?
Star vs. the Forces of Evil Season 2 was such a risky move. It added so many new elements to the series while also not being afraid to experiment with what already worked so well in Season 1. And I think it mostly paid off, delivering so many action-heavy and emotional storylines that took the show to some darker places and showed the characters starting to mature by having them deal with the consequences of their actions. But here we arrive at Season 3, the tipping point where many people start to drop the show. So naturally it's my absolute favourite of the 4. Before we talk about one of the best seasons of any animated series ever, I just want to note that before the season began, Star vs. the Forces of Evil made history as the 3rd Disney Channel / Disney XD animated series to be renewed for a 4th season, following in the footsteps of Kim Possible and Phineas and Ferb, which just tells you how big Star was for them at the time. So, how do you celebrate the 3rd season premiere of your most popular show? By cobbling together the first 7 episodes into an 8-minute TV movie, of course. Battle for Muni is Star vs. the Forces of Evil's magnum opus that demonstrated how the show was only picking up steam, despite what certain critics would say. It answered a bunch of questions, but in true Star vs. fashion, raised even more, while delivering an engaging story with some of the most creative visuals of the entire series. The event touched up on every running plot thread of the series so far, and brought the main storyline of Season 2 to an amazing conclusion, while also showing Season 3 was going to be even darker and more lore-heavy. Almost 4 years later, and it is still one of the strongest season premieres I have ever seen. But after Battle for Muni, Season 3 decided to shake things up in a big way, as once the fight with Toffee is over, Star stays on Muni, which from this point on is the show's primary setting, as the series is now about 2 things: Star exploring her magic and unlocking her full power, while also using her leverage as princess to end the way monsters are treated on Muni. And now with the full introduction of Eclipsa, the Queen of Darkness, the show starts to become this sort of political drama that explores the line between good and evil, brings the family lineage into question, and changes everything people thought they knew about the series up to that point. But all its plot twists make complete sense and only push the characters further, as more than ever, Star is facing new responsibilities as she faces a barrage of challenges every step closer she gets to reaching her goal. Old foes re-emerge, some of her closest allies turn against her, and she has to deal with all that while discovering new abilities as her magic starts acting up. The season also promoted Moon to main character status, as she ends up helping Eclipsa uncover a royal conspiracy that had been hidden from her by the High Commission. But what's going on with Marco during all this? Well, following helping save Muni, he tries to return to Earth but finds himself unable to adjust back into his old life. Jackie sees this and breaks up with him.
If you're forcing yourself to stay in Echo Creek just so I'll be happy, then we'll both end up miserable. You do see that, right?
This leads to Marco leaving Earth and heading to Muni, where he becomes Star's squire. And here's where all the relationship stuff really started to get on people's nerves. Star had seemingly moved on from her crush on Marco and gotten back together with Tom, only for Marco to show up and make things awkward once again when he realizes he has feelings for Star. But here's the thing. Even though, yes, the storyline here is a lot more annoying than it was in Season 2, but I feel people are still over-exaggerating how much of the season actually focused on it. So, let's look at the math. because apparently that's what I do now. Season 3 contains 38 episodes. 31 if you count Battle for Muni as a movie like I do. Of those, only 5 of them prominently feature anything regarding the love triangle. Scent of a Hoodie, Club Snubbed, Sophomore Slump, Lava Lake Beach, Booth Buddies, and if you really want to stretch it out, Demonsism is about Star and Tom's relationship, so 6 episodes at most. And all those are spread throughout the season because Season 3, in retrospect, has really good pacing. After Battle for Muni, the next few episodes are all about dealing with the aftermath and how those events have affected the characters, as well as introducing Eclipsa, which concludes with Marco arriving on Muni. Star realizes how unfairly monsters are treated and starts working to drum up support for her Human Monster Accord. But then her magic starts acting up, which Eclipsa advises her to embrace. These two plots continue, only pausing briefly to do a holiday special, and includes another 20-minute episode where we learn one of the antagonists from Season 1 is both part monster and Eclipsa's daughter. Then we get right back into it as Moon and Eclipsa investigate why Eclipsa's daughter has been stricken from all the records, followed immediately by the butterfly trap, and from then on, almost every episode moves the plot forward to the epic season finale. Nearly all episodes in Season 3 serve some major significance to the story, and most of the ones that don't are still crucially important for the character arcs. And now we arrive at the Meteora arc, also known as the best storyline the show ever did. Be warned, there are major spoilers ahead. So as I mentioned, in the episode Monster Bash, we learn Miss Heinous, who we first met as the strict headmistress of St. Olga's Reform School for Wayward Princesses, is actually Eclipsa's daughter, thus making her royalty. Star tells Moon, who doesn't believe her, and goes to question Eclipsa about it. A not so quick trip to the Royal Archives reveals that someone has completely removed Eclipsa's daughter and replaced her. Then we arrive at the butterfly trap, where we learn Eclipsa's ex-husband wanted nothing to do with a half-monster daughter, so she was swapped out for a peasant girl, meaning Star's family are not the true rulers of Muni. Meteora returns to St. O's and looks for her master file, where she learns the truth of what happened to her and realizes she's the rightful heir of Muni, so she sets out to take over the kingdom and reclaim her throne. After leaving a trail of destruction in her wake, Eclipsa and Moon find her but are unable to talk her down, leading to Moon disappearing. With Moon missing, Star is now queen and must figure out how to stop Meteora, who is vastly approaching, as we see the culmination of Star's growth over the first 3 seasons as she steps up and becomes a responsible and brave leader who defends her kingdom despite having lost everyone close to her. Even with her best efforts, Meteora overpowers Star, only for Eclipsa to take the wand and defend her as she makes the ultimate sacrifice to save the people who imprisoned her. And finally realizing how she can make up for the actions of her family, Star gives the wand and kingdom back to Eclipsa.
Things haven't been right since my family took the kingdom. The best thing I can do as queen is return what my family stole from you.
But then, as it turns out, Eclipsa's spell didn't kill Meteora, instead turning her back into a baby, thus giving Eclipsa a second chance at the life she wanted, as she returns to her husband Globgor, ending the season on an emotional, if foreboding note.
Hello, my love. We're home.
Season 3 of Star vs. the Forces of Evil is the show reaching its true potential, fully embracing the high fantasy elements and showing how each of the characters have really come into their own. Season 1 was an almost completely different show. Season 2 was this amazing, if a little unfocused transition, but Season 3 is where the show finally figured out just what it wants to be. The serialized story became much more focused and at the forefront, the expansions it made to the world and lore were very much welcome and helped keep things fresh, and the series really started pushing the envelope in terms of what stories you could tell in a Disney cartoon. I understand why people loved the more slice of life stuff in seasons 1 and 2, but I just prefer the style and pacing of this one. But now that the series has finally figured itself out, for better or for worse, I can't wait to see what they do with the next few seasons. Oh. Right. Disney show. Here we are, Star vs. the Forces of Evil Season 4, the final season that everyone hated. So, what do I think of it? It's alright. Now, before I get disliked into oblivion, Let me expand on that by saying I like about 70% of Season 4. I don't think it's anywhere near Season 3, even the parts I really enjoy, but it's a mostly serviceable conclusion right up until episode 22, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. Right now, let's rewind and talk about the hype surrounding this season, because as previously stated, Star is only the third Disney Channel / XD cartoon to be renewed for a 4th season. While Season 3 was wrapping up, it was announced the series would be moving from Disney XD to the main Disney Channel, which was huge as it showed Disney were really trying to push the series and give it more exposure. That was not what was happening, but it was a nice thought to believe for a while. Season 4 kicks off shortly after where Season 3 ended, as Star, Marco, and the man formerly known as King River are searching for Moon, which they eventually manage to do but find she's lost her memories. And that's pretty much it for our 40-minute season opener. The main story for the first half of Season 4, and what I feel is the strongest part of the season, is Star trying to help Eclipsa gain favour with the people of Munich, as that's where most of the moments of genuine emotion come from. As for the characters, there actually isn't too much to say. Season 4 is much less about presenting the characters with new challenges that really test them, and more so kind of a victory lap as they get to sort of sit back and enjoy the fruits of their labour, with Star witnessing her goal of uniting humans and monsters finally come to fruition. That's not to say they become stagnant or boring, but the story of a rebel princess who learned to accept responsibility and make the ultimate sacrifice to make amends for the past atrocities committed by her family is pretty much over now. I kind of argue that Eclipsa and Moon become the main focus of the season, as Eclipsa struggles with settling back into being queen and trying to win over the people's favour, all while debating whether or not to free her husband. Moon, meanwhile, once she gets her memories back, finds the people of Munich start to rally around her in response to monsters starting to be treated fairly. This is where Mina Loveberry comes back into the mix, as she had been a minor antagonist in seasons 2 and 3, but now comes back into the fold as the main villain. Mina is the last of the Solarian warriors, an army created by Queen Solaria the Monster Carver, who was also Eclipsa's mother. After years of being fed nothing but lies and propaganda, she wants to overthrow Eclipsa and quote-unquote return Muni to its former glory. But then we have the romance subplot, which, funny enough, despite only 2 episodes actually focusing on it, has never been more aggravating. Which brings us to Season 4, Episode 14, Coronation. Star vs. the Forces of Evil's final masterpiece that is a much better finale than the actual finale. While getting ready for Eclipsa's coronation, Globgor is freed from his crystal imprisonment as the Magical High Commission detains everyone. Star manages to trail him and, with some help from River, eventually is able to calm him down. It's revealed the whole thing was a plan by one of the members of the High Commission to crystallize Eclipsa and Globgor. Eclipsa's family is reunited as the kingdom finally accepts both her and the new Mune. This was the last time Star vs. delivered such a well-told story about love and acceptance that was just as funny as it was emotional. Whenever I rewatch the series, this is the point where I always stop because it's the most conclusive ending the show has. But there's still 13 episodes to go. Following all that, Star and Marco return to Earth for a while, as we get an episode that pays off a long-running mystery and another that gives all the season 1 and 2 side characters a last hurrah. I do kinda see what they were going for with these. Trying to have Star and Marco go back to season 1, but everything is just too different to return to how things used to be. But outside of our final trip to the Never Zone, I just find all these episodes kind of forgettable. And with that, let's talk about the finale. The actual finale, because like Battle for Munich, the crew had written the last few episodes of the series to be aired in one huge special event, which Disney didn't do. I'm going to talk about how badly season 4 was treated by the network in a bit, but just know when I talk about the Star vs. the Forces of Evil series finale, I'm talking about everything from Sad Teen Hotline to the very end. Now, here is the hottest take of the video. I think the Star vs. the Forces of Evil season 4 finale is good. However, while I do like it as a season finale, I do concur that it is a terrible series finale. The first 8 or so parts do a nice job at starting to wrap up the season. Good action, some really nice moments of character growth, a lot of well done plot twists, not to mention Star and Marco get together, so that is finally over. But Mina is too powerful for Star's magic, so they all escape, and through an amazing callback to a phenomenal season 2 episode, Star realizes the only way to stop Mina and her army and save everyone is by destroying magic altogether, which would close the portal portals between dimensions, thus separating her and Marco forever. And then we arrive at Cleaved. Okay, let's do this. I find Cleaved much more frustrating than I do bad, because there are some shining moments. In particular when Star, Eclipser and Moon are destroying the magic and all the ghosts of the previous queens gather around them, letting Moon see her mother one more time and having Solaria finally accept Eclipser and her family. And here is where the episode starts to lose people. With the portals closing, Star decides to go to Earth as she falls back down into the realm of magic. She finds Marco, who had the same idea, as they embrace each other while everything crumbles around them. And with the last bit of magic left in them, they cleave Earth and Moon together, creating a new world. Now, people have thoughts on this, specifically the implications of what Star destroying the magic does. But if I went into all that, we'd be here even longer, so I'll just say what my biggest problem with the ending is. My main issue with the Star vs. the Forces of Evil series finale is that it betrays everything the show was up to that point. And I'm not talking about the fact Star destroys magic. I'm talking about the fact Star and Marco, even if it is accidental, cause a huge change in the world and we don't see any of the fallout. The series had always been incredibly conscious of how the actions of the characters impacted the world around them. If a character made a decision, they were going to deal with all of the consequences. Whether it be Star revealing her mistakes to the kingdom or handing the crown and wand back over to Eclipser. So having the series end with the main characters causing such a huge status quo change and not seeing the aftermath feels like a cheat. With all that said, Star vs. the Forces of Evil Season 4 was not the best note to end the show on, and the fan response further accentuated that point. It's true, the writing of this season was not as strong as the first three, but I feel what made it sting even more was Disney Channel's treatment of the series. When it was revealed that Star would be moving over to the Disney Channel for its 4th season, fans were elated that the series would be on a much bigger, more successful channel that would hopefully give it more exposure. Even after the announcement the show was ending with the upcoming season, it was all still so exciting as Disney Channel began airing seasons 1 to 3 in build up to it. This was going to be amazing! Yeah, so for 11 weeks straight, Disney Channel aired 2 new half hours every Saturday in a dead time slot. No hiatuses, no time to sit and process what was happening. In just over 2 months, both the season and Star vs. the Forces of Evil were gone. Soon as Cleaved aired, the series was erased from Disney Channel's scheduling. No joke, until recently to me, this was the most scummy thing the network had ever done to one of its animated shows. They made a huge deal about bringing it over to the network and then burned it off as quickly and quietly as they could because it didn't fit with their brand. Now you may ask, well, if they were trying to kill it off so fast, why wouldn't they have aired the last few episodes as a special event like the crew wanted? Well, doing a huge event that was over an hour long to celebrate the series ending would require them to actually promote the show, and they were not interested in doing any of that. I genuinely believe this move is what killed Season 4 for so many. The abysmal scheduling ruined the pacing of the parts of Season 4 that were genuinely good, and by the end there was basically no fanfare for the series whatsoever. The series that for the past 3 years had been their most successful and popular animated show. It just baffles me. Well, we've talked about the history of the series, gone over its rise and downfall, and even relived some of its greatest moments. So, I guess all we're left with is the question of, what is Star vs. the Forces of Evil now? In that, how will the series be remembered? Regardless of its issues, be they a lackluster ending or annoying love triangles, I want Star vs. the Forces of Evil to be remembered for what it did right. How it pushed the limits of what stories a Disney animated series were allowed to tackle, delivering some of the most complex and well-developed protagonists to ever come out of the studio, not being afraid to ever reinvent the wheel and experiment with the very fabric of the series, to most of the time outstanding results. Even though some of its handling of certain topics was questionable at best, I still like that it tried, and just how ambitious it was for a Disney show. But more so than any of that, it deserves recognition for turning Disney TVA into what it is today. Gravity Falls got the ball rolling in terms of story-driven cartoons on the network, and that cannot be understated. But Star ushered in the era of complex, epic fantasy serialized cartoons for Disney. So Tangled the series, Amphibia and the Owl House all owe a lot to Star. When the dust finally settles, hopefully people will be able to look back fondly on what was a weird, wild, beloved, emotionally charged, wonderful series about a magical princess from another dimension. Okay, my plan to annihilate my credibility has worked. Maybe a little too well. I mean, I just want them to not listen to me, I don't want them to hate me. Okay, as a form of damage control, I will now be taking a vow of silence until this whole thing blows over. Starting now. Thanks for watching, folks. See you real soon. Damn it!